everyone. Welcome to the podcast, High Risk for Heartbreak. I am your host, Christina, and I'm so glad you decided to join me today. For those of you who are new here, I pray you find value in at least one thing I say today. And to my old and faithful returning crew, you know just how much I appreciate you. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Let me start this episode by first acknowledging victimhood and how it impacts nearly every person upon this earth at some point and time in their lives. This episode is not intended in any way to downplay the countless atrocities that are done against our brothers and sisters that we share this world with. And I really do not take it lightly, the serious nature of victimization, especially because it has been a personal experience for me in my life, and that has given me just a completely different insight to just how debilitating and even fatal abuse can be. Today, the goal is actually to speak about personalized victimhood and the nature of perpetually living as a victim versus what God created us to be, victors. So without further ado, let's relate. I think a great many of us have been acquainted with a person that in their life, everything just seems to be against them. They grew up with the world against them, and then they live out in their adult life with the world against them. Every choice that they make just doesn't end well. It's the fault of someone else. Every great thing that happens to them carries a caveat or a trick that will somehow turn this great thing into a liability. They will speak with an air of pessimism and operate from a place of woe is me. I'm sure you heard that term before. This type of person just lives in this reality that is strictly their own. But through their interactions with others, it quickly becomes everyone else's cross to carry. They are the victim. The word victim is defined as one that is acted on and usually adversely affected by a force or agent. Another definition is one that is subjected to aggression, oppression, hardship, or mistreatment. And undoubtedly, this word is a state of being that carries a heavy load. So it doesn't necessarily make sense that one would want to haul this around on a daily basis, but there are many of us who are. And I guess for some, this has been a perpetual thing, a perpetual part of their existence. So really, what else do they know? Victimhood or a victim mentality is where individuals feel consistently powerless, blaming external circumstances for their problems rather than taking personal responsibility for their problems and taking the onus to change them. We have all had these moments in life, of course. This week, a bunch of things happened to me that I was able to resonate very closely with this mentality of just like, woe is me. Why are all these things happening to me and all happening to me at once? And it's really hard to resist falling into that mindset when so many things around you are just piling up and not going away. and the world around you seems to be just going awry. And as a result, you might find yourself feeling very down on yourself. You might feel unmotivated even to change your circumstances because where do you start? And especially if you're someone with ADHD or obsessive compulsive disorder, where do you begin? What do you start solving first? And you might even find yourself trying to bargain and reason that what you're experiencing couldn't possibly be because of you. Certainly, you would not have made these choices to land yourself in this situation. Certainly, you would have had the foresight not to become the evidence of your choices. Interestingly enough, though, when you are the victim, you get to bypass all of that responsibility. Someone else gets to rectify that state that you're in, and you get to kind of dissociate for the time being. Sometimes it feels really good to dissociate because there's no responsibility in it. And I can hear someone now saying, well, I don't get to dissociate. I have all of these responsibilities on my own, on myself. I don't get the grace and the space to dissociate. First of all, obviously, we don't want to be doing that. We want to be fully present. We want to be fully owning the things that God has called us to fully own and not dissociating and just releasing that all, right? But even in that thought of like, I don't even get to dissociate, that feeling or that thought that you're having, that you're missing out on something, is you relating to the mentality of victimhood. God gave us responsibility to steward the people, to steward the things and the opportunities and the obstacles even in our lives. We have dominion. We have dominion, and we're going to define that. So let's define dominion really quickly from a biblical context. Dominion refers to the authority and responsibility given by God to humans to govern, to manage, and steward his creation. There's a reason why our brains were made the way that they are from other types of creation. There's a reason why we have the will, we have the soul, we have the emotion, the imagination, the affections that other creation does not have, because God made us the stewards, the managers, right? To have dominion over those things. We are mandated through God's creation of us to be caretakers of other creation. And what a high honor. What an incredible honor when you really think about it that way. It's also a really heavy honor, potentially wearying honor to have dominion. You and I were chosen for such a time as this. We were created for such a time as this, in this era, with that family, in the community that we have, with the social status we have, with the economic status we have, with the abilities or inabilities that we have. And the list, of course, goes on. But God created us to take care of other creation. Gemini AI drafted something that I liked. I don't usually like everything, and I always cross-reference and double-check because it's the first thing to pop up when you research anything now on Google. So I always like, and then go past it, or I'll look at it and be like, let me cross-reference, because sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it's wrong. But there was something that Gemini AI came up with that I liked, and when I was doing my research on the word dominion, and it says that dominion is stewardship over domination. Stewardship reflects God's character, right? God is not a dominating God. He's not a domineering God. He could be. He's a God of grace and a God of mercy. His dispensation of that is something that he doesn't have to give, but he does. Dominion also delegates authority. It's not this absolute. It's not an independent power, rather it's management of power. Shepherd leadership. Rada, which is a Hebrew word for rule or subdue, which we find in Genesis, that was said a lot, describes caring for creation like a shepherd rather than like a tyrant. Very different energies, okay? Energy is not the word I want to use, but I don't know what the word is that I want to use. But they're very different. There's a very different mode or modal, right? Lastly, Gemini AI said order cultivation. Cultivating, which we talked about in the last episode that I put up, we are called to cultivate. We are called to build and develop the earth to its fruitfulness, right? We know how to plant plants and grow fruit and build buildings and innovate on those things that are built. That is bringing the earth to its level of fruitfulness. And these breakdowns, honestly, are really beautiful. They're beautiful reminders of what we are called to do as humans. But life will have its circumstances that, of course, will stand in the way sometimes of this being done effectively. And there will be these things that occur in our relationships with people, things that will occur at work and in our personal lives that will test our ability to exercise proper dominion. We might find ourselves in a place of tyrantism, being a tyrant. We might find ourselves in a place of over control, lording versus shepherding. We might find ourselves in a place of complete freeze or flight state because of what is happening around us and whether or not it seems possible that we can just exercise dominion over it. And looking back at this victim mentality, it would be the opposite, of course, of all the things that I just listed. Instead of stewardship with a victim mentality, you might find yourself squandering opportunities. You might find yourself sabotaging your relationships and stopping things from becoming fruitful in your life. And this may happen because of emotional or mental patterns of behavior that cause you to choose unfruitfully, right? There's many reasons why. It's not just a one formula or one reason behind this. Sorry, the sun is like burning my skin a little bit. But this is why we go to therapy. This is why we have counsel, counsel and friends, but also professional counsel, and why it's so important, because it can help us unpack these mental and emotional patterns that replicate in our behavior. Having a victim mentality will also cause you to aggress what you are meant to assert. Now, you might find yourself in a situation that is not actually calling you to carry so much, yet you take it all on by yourself. And then when it fails, it's the responsibility of the circumstance or other imaginary factors. It could not have been because of you. You didn't approach it with dominion, though. And you approached it rather with domination, right? You're trying to dominate, to conquer this thing, which is void of the heart and the nature of God, because that's not what God is, right? That's not who he is. God the Father exemplifies himself as loving and gracious and merciful, like I said earlier. So he does not force anything. Rather, he allows and corrects. He allows and corrects. Free will is a thing for real. And sometimes when we exercise our free will, we land in scenarios and situations that we cannot get ourselves out of because we bit off more than we can chew. We aggressed what we were meant to assert. When you are asserting something, there's a level of investigation. There's a level of testing and measuring, experimenting to make sure that it is safe, to make sure that you are capable, to make sure that it's going to yield the results that you want, right? And there's feedback there. I think when you're asserting something or someone, when you're aggressing, it's an override of all of that together. And we are not meant to override the things that God has given us stewardship over. We are meant to assert them. Jesus came as a man to teach us how to be human. He's teaching us how to assert a life like his, a love like his, to assert better relationships upon this earth, to assert better stewardship, to assert the heart of God. My pastor started an amazing series this past weekend called Humanology, and he was emphasizing that Jesus is 100% God and 100% man, and he came to teach us how to be human. But sometimes I think, especially if you are a believer, it can feel like you have been destined to carry so much more than we actually are. And honestly, it's such a relief that we are not meant to carry everything that God is. We're not meant to be, as my pastor mentioned on Sunday, demigods. God never created us to be demigods. He wanted us to be really great at being humans. And it's a relief, because we really get to see Jesus when we look at his example and his life here on earth in his humanness, though he could have easily deflected to his godness at any point. And yes, in miracles, he was, his godness was showing up. But there are times when he could have rescued himself in a immutable, omnipotent nature, and he did not. And at any point, he could have handled a human matter with his godly will, right? I don't know if that makes sense what I'm trying to say, but he exemplified for us, though, how to assert our humanity, our humanness. That means, assert it in a righteous way, right? Assert it not in a we get to do all the things because we are human, and being human encompasses all things, but rather to be okay with feeling, to be okay with thinking, to be okay with questioning, to search, all of those things. So another thing that having a victim mentality will do is will cause us to mismanage the blessings of life. We will encounter roadblocks, of course, and adversities and circumstances along the way, and then we become reactionary and we fail to plan. So when everything fails, we react. That is a very natural instinct, right? We mismanage people that don't do what we expect. We mismanage opportunities that don't turn out as we would have liked for them to turn out. And we mismanage our response to it all. Victimhood will have you pushing away everyone by putting the responsibility on them to solve what is bad, when you could have solved it, because it's in your locus of control. It is in your sphere of dominionship. And it will cause us to squander what could have really been recovered and redeemed. Victimhood will cause us to fall into these very long woe is me seasons that could have better been used as time to heal and reclaim what was given, and more importantly, what God trusted us to manage well. A victim mentality will also cause you to kill off what could have lived. Now, I don't think of myself as great at growing and raising plants. I can definitely keep a dog alive, but when it comes to plants, I would not have been great in the garden, okay? Lord help me, okay? When it comes to plants, I'm going to try again this year, y'all. Herbs are coming up. I'm going to try to get some herbs out there on my balcony. We'll see. We'll see, okay? We are called, though, to cultivate from the materials that we are given. We are called to develop from the raw resources that are given to us. It's like baking a cake. Baking a cake is not just putting batter in a pan and putting it in the oven. There's a lot of raw resources, a lot of raw ingredients that go into creating the batter. And then the cake comes because you baked it. We don't always, though, know how to put all these things together, especially if we are the blueprint for something. Have you tried creating a new recipe? Not reading a recipe, but your own recipe. It takes trial and error. You're throwing in a little bit of this. You're throwing in a little bit of that. You're tasting it. You're making mistakes. You're burning it. You know, if you're the blueprint person, God may be calling you to something great to create, and there's going to inevitably be setbacks, and that's going to cause you either to go into this freeze or fawn state, maybe even flight state, versus this fight state where you are looking to conquer and move through these things by continuing to cultivate, by continuing to assert success. Many on the outside may not understand the process of you trying to grow something up from the ground up, and they may measure your progress and your process to other people's finished products. And you might even find yourself measuring yourself that way as well against others. But the word says, from everyone whom has been given much, much will be required. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. In managing the blessings of life and the roadblocks that will inevitably come, it is important to know that God gives us what we need, the raw resources and materials to manage it. And furthermore, He will give us more when we manage it well. In closing, I want to say that it is absolutely understandable if you are in a season where you are struggling to see yourself as God does. It's also understandable if you are in a season where you just need that extra affirmation from the scriptures to rise out of this low place because you feel like a victim. And sometimes we are victims to our circumstances and to people, but there's a difference between being a stage of life or it being a state of life. Let the lowly seasons strengthen you, and then let them leave you. Because your testimony isn't for reliving that. It's an account of the relief from that victimized place. I want to thank you guys so much for loving yourself first so that you can then go and love your neighbor. Until next time.